is make sure that you're getting a recording of this. I want to go ahead and share my screen with you and point out some things really quick. It should be helpful. First thing I would like to share with you is that we have a Facebook group that actually coincides with this meetup group, and it has the same name, Live Law of Attraction Money, Wealth, and Success Training. We'd invite you to come join us. All you have to do is sign into your own Facebook account, go into the search function, and you can look us up. The other way you can find us is to go directly to facebook.com/groups/money manifesting coach as one word. Again, that's facebook.com/groups/money manifesting coach as one word. Okay, so why would you want to come join us? Well, I'd like to point out here, for instance, what we like to do is record these meetings and then make them available to you guys. So what we do is we post them into the Facebook group typically 24 to 48 hours after the actual meeting. So for instance, let's say that you are on today and you really like something that you saw or heard, you can hop back into the Facebook group within 24 or 48 hours and you can review that meeting. Also, let's say, for instance, you've been attending and let's say you were here with us on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. Some reason you couldn't make Thursday, but you're able to make Friday. Well, let's say we're going through a piece of material that's taking a few days to get through. You can always go back to Thursday, the day that you missed, and go ahead and watch the recording of the meeting, okay? So it's a great way for you to always stay caught up with what we're doing. The next thing I want to point out is what we are in the process of going through. We're in the process of going through a book called Hidden Treasures. It's called Hidden Treasures. It was written by a friend of mine, an author by the name of Leslie Householder. She's been a friend and a mentor and a trainer. She and I both were actually coached and mentored by Bob Proctor and his organization to be coaches and facilitators for Bob Proctor's different programs. Since then, she's gone independent, and so have I. But this is something that she has authored. She authored it several years ago, and you can find it on Amazon and go buy it. However, she has made it available for free, which is pretty awesome. So I want to share it with you. Why are we going to go through this particular book? Well, there's a couple different things. The first thing that we went through, starting about 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks and a couple days, is we went through a book called The Science of Getting Rich, which essentially tells you the formula for manifesting more money and wealth in your life, okay? And what was touched upon there briefly were some of the different laws that we need to obey. Most people are not aware that there's more than one law. A lot of people say, oh yeah, I've heard of law of attraction. And they feel that law of attraction kind of covers everything, especially if you're watching the movie The Secret or reading the book The Secret. They're both phenomenal works. I love both the movie and I love the book. However, stuff's missing. And if you try to bake a cake, for instance, at home and you're missing ingredients, it just does not turn out the way it needs to. There are actually 7 laws that govern manifesting more money and wealth in our lives. And you need to be aware of what all 7 of them are and how they function so that you can obey them. If you're not obedient to those laws, you might accidentally be breaking them, not intentionally, not to be obnoxious, but because you just don't know any better. It doesn't matter that you don't know any better, though, because there still will be consequences. What do I mean by that? A little child could crawl across the floor, crawl up onto a chair, get up onto a countertop. Let's picture one of those like big islands in the kitchen. And this little child can only crawl, can't walk, can't talk yet. And it goes crawling across the counter. If the child doesn't know to stop before it gets to the end of the counter, the child's going to keep going. If the child keeps going, there is a law that is going to have a negative impact on the life of that child. That law is the law of gravity. That child will fall off the other side. Depending on how high up and what the material is on the floor and what part of the body the child hits first and second and whatnot, will determine the kind of pain and suffering or damage that may happen to that child. Now, is that child completely innocent? Yeah, child didn't know any better. If the child actually knew what was going to happen, the child wouldn't have done what it did, okay? It might have climbed up there, but it absolutely wouldn't have gone over the other side. Probably would have sat on the counter, either tried to get back onto the chair, which may have fallen that way too, which wouldn't be the greatest thing, or would have waited till somebody came along to pick it up and get it off the counter. The point is the child was innocent. The point is the child did not understand there's this thing called the law of gravity. And the child, even though it was unaware, still suffered consequences. Okay? Well, that's what happens when you don't follow and obey the laws of the universe in relationship to adding money and wealth in your life. So we're going through these laws, and that's essentially what the book Hidden Treasures is about. Leslie does a phenomenal job of explaining what each of them are. We're in the middle of going through the first one right now, and I want to show you how to get a copy of this book so that you can follow along, and or so you can get caught up with us, and or so you can read it on your own whenever you like. If you go to hiddentreasuresbook.com and scroll down a little ways, you will find a spot here where it says click for your free download. That's how you get a copy of it, okay? If you want your own paperback copy or Kindle copy or Audible or anything like that, you can always go to Amazon and buy it. However, if you want a free copy, I just showed you how to get the free copy, okay? Next thing I want to share with you is the book itself that we're in the middle of going through right here. And we are on page 35 of Hidden Treasures, all right? So here's how we function. What we're going to do today is I'm going to start reading where we left off. We're in the law of perpetual transmutation, and we're partway through that particular chapter. I'm going to add commentary where I think it might be helpful and appropriate and help you guys understand what it is that Leslie's teaching. However, like I said, she does a pretty darn good job in her own words. So I really like this book and the way she explains these things. I think she's done a phenomenal job. All right. We are going to save 10 to 15 minutes or so towards the end of what we're doing for interaction with each other. Okay, so what do I mean by that? We will have the opportunity to talk with each other. You guys will be able to share what you want to share and ask whatever questions that you want to ask. So that's what we'll be doing at that particular time. And that'll be the last 10 to 15 minutes. Before I start reading, I'm going to get a sip of water here. And I'm going to go ahead. I want to just check one thing. I'm going to come out of screen share for just a moment. Okay, perfect. Just wanted to double check something. All right, so here we go. Why we pray often. As important as it is that we strive to get our minds and hearts in alignment with the Lord's, okay, hold on. As important as it is as we strive to get our minds and heart in alignment with the Lord's, our reason for praying often is important as well. By the way, you don't have to believe the way any particular person believes for the laws of the universe to work for you, okay? Leslie's speaking from her point of view and from her, partly her upbringing, but also her training of understanding how the laws of the universe work, all right? And where we stopped though, but she was talking about prayer. If you don't like the word prayer, think of meditation and however you like, but essentially what you're wanting to do is have a connection with God in the universe so they can help guide and direct your path, okay? So let me read this again. As important as it is that we strive to get our minds and heart in alignment with the Lord's, our reason for praying often is important as well. We must pray often about our desire not to be sure he heard us, but to ask for continual guidance and seek for ourselves the confirmation from his Spirit that we're on the right path and that he will grant the success we seek. A confirmation is one of those tender mercies which the Spirit sometimes provides to us to help us be strong through the waiting period. Remember, if my child asks me for a sandwich and I say yes, it would be out of place for her to ask again. So it is with us. After receiving a confirmation that our request will be granted, to continue asking for the same thing would seem inappropriate. I believe that may constitute one aspect of the vain repetitions the scriptures counsel us against. Vain repetitions. Let's look at how often we ask. When we pray for something, do we use vain repetitions? Perhaps we've done so unknowingly. Perhaps you have a desire for which you've asked the Lord time and time again, hoping that your persistence would pay off. When my children do that to me, I call it nagging, especially if I've just responded with a yes, without having a chance to deliver it yet. It would be perplexing for my child to ask again and again after receiving a positive response. I'd wonder, don't you believe me? Didn't you hear me? Just because I say yes, it doesn't mean that it has to happen in the next 30 seconds. There is a space of time between yes and the delivery of the promised sandwich. It's a reasonable thing to allow some time for the goods to show up. So, what if we asked once with a heart full of faith, knowing that to ask again might be what the Lord refers to as a vain repetition? After all, he already heard us the first time, and in fact, knew what we needed long before we ever uttered the prayer. If we took the time to first ask if he would grant the request, and if we received an answer apiece, then wouldn't it be unnecessary to keep asking? Perhaps instead we could be at peace, knowing it was only a matter of time, because that which we asked for was already on its way. Then we'd begin to move our feet and get to work as though it depended on us. We'd make our way to the lunch table and maybe even get the bread out of the bread box and jelly from the refrigerator ourselves. We'd remind ourselves that he said, "Ask and you shall receive." And since we asked, we'd know that we would eventually receive. We wouldn't feel desperate or think that our repeated requests were necessary to get him to hear us and respond. Let us be careful lest we nag the Lord. Sometimes we can weary him with our petitions, and even if they are not his will for us, he will grant the request and allow us to suffer the natural consequences of failing to trust him in all things. Be careful. Instead of praying that we might receive it, it would be more fitting that our continual prayer would be prayers of gratitude for that which is coming. I use my understanding of the law of perpetual transmutation to imagine the resources I need finding their way to me. This helps me believe that if I get to work doing all I can do, there are unseen forces at work as well, preparing to provide me with all I need to accomplish the goal. I expect to make the happy connection somewhere along the way. Isn't this amazing? If you think the first law is intriguing, just wait, it gets better. Oops, slid the wrong direction there. Here we go. All right. Lesson 2, the law of relativity. Occasionally we find ourselves in disagreeable circumstances. It is natural to think, my life stinks, everything's going wrong. Well, don't forget lesson 1, the law of perpetual transmutation. These are thoughts too, and if we allow ourselves useful for helping to keep good thoughts in your mind. The law of relativity states that nothing we experience is fundamentally good or bad. Bad things that happen to us are only bad relative to something better. So if you're convinced that you're dealing with a rotten circumstance, then ask God to help you see it differently. Compare your situation to something much worse, and you will be able to maintain more faithful thoughts. That is the goal. Some of the earliest pioneers, settlers of the American West, traveled with handcarts instead of horse-drawn carriages. They were religious refugees, seeking a place where they would not be persecuted for their beliefs. The leaders had organized numerous groups to travel together. While many came in covered wagons, others were short on time as well as supplies and began their journey without handcarts. One particular company was called the Martin Handcart Company, which was organized to leave late in the summer from Iowa. The members of the company were caught in early snows near the Continental Divide in 1856 before being rescued, and their suffering was unlike anything I can comprehend. I want to take you on a piece of their journey. Put yourself in their shoes. Pay close attention to your feelings as you visualize what you're reading. It is important for this lesson that you concentrate as you read, rather than just skimming the words and glossing over them. When they say mother, think of your own mother. When they say I, let it be you, etc. At the end of this discussion, we will be going through an exercise to help drive this law home. Since this book is intended to make a difference, and since a difference in your life relies on a switch in your thinking, there will never be a better time than right here, right now, to try it. Practice exercising your mental faculties by visualizing and allowing yourself to experience what you're reading. This one thing may be the most important thing you do during this time. You're already investing in reading this book. Let's begin the journey. The terrible strain of the journey was too much for him, and one night near the Sweetwater, he passed away at the age of 35. Our little brother, Peter, died the same night. They built a fire to thaw the ground so that a grave could be dug. Then, with my baby brother clasped in his arms, they wrapped him in a blanket and laid him tenderly away. My darling mother had to take up the journey alone with us 5 children. Provisions were almost gone. Desolation reigned. The company passed off the main road to Martin's Ravine to escape the terrible blizzards and storms, for we had little clothing and had given up all hope. Death had taken a heavy toll, and the ravine was like an overcrowded tomb. No mortal tongue could describe the suffering. Elizabeth's sermon. My husband's health began to fail, and his heart almost broke to see me falling in shafts. Myself and children hungry, almost naked, footsore, and himself nearly done for. Many trials came after this. My oldest boy had the mountain fever. We had to haul him in the cart. There was not room in the wagon. One day, we started him out before the carts in the morning to walk with the aged and sick. But we had not gone far from our journey before we found him lying by the roadside, unable to go any further. I picked him up and put him on my back and drew my cart as well, but could not manage far. So I put him in the cart, which made 3 children and my luggage. My husband failing more each day. The captain put a young man to help me for a short time. My other son, Henry, walked at 7 years old, 1,300 miles, with the exception of a few miles. I will here state that there was no time in crossing the river to stop and take off clothing, but we had to wade through and draw our carts at the same time with our clothes dripping wet. My husband's sufferings have always pained me, and I can never forget them. Poor Rob's, age 5, feet began to freeze. I cannot remember the place. It was after wading a very deep river, Plot maybe. The freezing commenced. We had no wood but sagebrush. I went out and cut the sage to keep the fire all night, covered them up with their feet to the fire, and cut some more and kept the fire as well as I could. My clothes were frozen stiff. Well, we got through that night. Your father would not walk now. He would get into wagon after wagon, only to be turned out. The cattle were giving out, and everyone had their friends. But the friend Death would soon end his sufferings. John, age 9, and Rob had to ride. Henry, age 7, walked. Your father would take my arm and walk a little distance, fall on his knees with weakness. We moved from Devil's Gate. After our food had given out, as I said before, we went into our tents to die. I always thought I could get through to Salt Lake City and try to encourage my husband, but he was starving and he had always lived good at home. Your father, after having some food and clothes, seemed to revive. He called you to him and told you to be good children and do all you could for me. And then he said to me, God bless you, Ellie. That being the name he called me. You have saved my life this time. I said, we must hold out now and get to the wagons. But we had to go back to the quarter pound of flour, and he sank under it. I think he would not have died if he had had food, but he was spared the trial ahead. We went to bed about 3. He put his arm around me and said, I am done, and breathed his last. Father was buried in the morning with 2 more in the grave. I stood like a statue, bewildered, not a tear. The cold chills, even now as I write, creep over my body, for I feel I can still see the wolves waiting for their bodies as they would come down the camp before we left. When I got into the camp, I found it some help to toast the rawhide on the coals and chew it. It helped to keep the hunger away, for I was feeling it rather keenly now. I had to take a portion of poor Robert's feet off, which pierced my soul. I had to sever the leaders with a pair of scissors. Little did I think when I bought them in Old England that they would be used for such a purpose. Every day some portion was decaying until the poor boy's feet were all gone. Then John's began to freeze, and then afterwards my own. Poor brother Blair, a very tall, thin man, he was starving and was eating a piece of griddle cake. And another poor brother, not as hungry, asked for a piece of it. He said, I cannot do it. I want it for myself. Poor fellow, he died in the night, and so one after another passed away. Fathers, mothers, sisters, brothers, and friends. Many, many honest souls laid in Mother Earth. A severe storm came up. I think it was on the Sweetwater, but I was so troubled I forgot all about the names of the places. My eldest boy, John's feet decaying, my boys, both of them, losing their limbs, their father dead, my own feet very painful. I thought, why can't I die? Are you taking the time to feel a portion of what they felt? One more to go. Ephraim Hanks. I reached the ill-fated train just as the immigrants were camping for the night. The sight that met my gaze as I entered their camp can never be erased from my memory. The starved forms and haggard countenances of the poor sufferers as they moved about slowly, shivered with cold to prepare their scanty evening meal, was enough to touch the stoutest heart. When they saw me coming, they hailed me with joy inexpressible. And when they further beheld the supply of fresh meat I brought into camp, their gratitude knew no bounds. Flocking around me, one would say, oh, please, give me a small piece of meat. Another would exclaim, my poor children are starving, do give me a little. And children with tears in their eyes would call out, give me some, give me some. At first, I tried to wait on them and handed out the meat as they called for it, but finally I told them to help themselves. 5 minutes later, both my horses had been released of their extra burden, and the meat was gone. I have but a very little to say about the sufferings of Captain Martin's company before I joined it, but it had passed through terrible ordeals. Women and the larger children helped the men to pull the hand carts, and in crossing the frozen streams. They had to break the ice with their feet in fording the Plotty River. The largest stream they had to cross after the cold weather set in, the clothes of the immigrants were frozen stiff around their bodies before they could exchange them for others. This is supposed to have been the cause of the many deaths, which occurred soon afterwards. It has been stated on good authority that 19 immigrants died one night. The survivors who performed the last acts of kindness to those who perished were not strong enough to dig the graves of sufficient depth to preserve the bodies from the wild beasts, and wolves were actually seen tearing open the graves before the company was out of sight. Many of the survivors, in witnessing the terrible afflictions and losses, became at last almost stupefied or mentally dazed. So, what is your biggest challenge right now? What would these immigrants have to say about the load you're carrying? What are your feelings about what they had to endure? Read on. At a later time, there was a meeting where some people were expressing criticism that church leadership had allowed the Martin Handcart Company to leave so late in the season. A man who had been in that company and was listening to their comments was finally compelled to stand and speak his mind. He asked the people to please stop, and he told them that they had no knowledge of what they were talking about. He said the facts and details of the experience were meaningless because they didn't provide proper context of the issues at hand. Was it a mistake to go so late? Yes. His sufferings were unspeakable and many did not survive. But he asked if they ever heard any of the survivors speak a word of criticism. No, they had not. And neither did any of the company leave the church. Imagine that. He said that because of their experiences, they developed an absolute assurance that God lives, for they developed a strong personal enduring relationship with him through their adversities. I'm reminded of Job's similar response to Zophar, the Naamite. Job said, "Hold your peace, let me alone, that I may speak, and let come on me what will. Wherefore do I take my flesh in my teeth and put my life in mine hand? Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him." I don't know how easy it was for the man in the handcart company to feel gratitude while he was still on the trek. But in hindsight, he was able to recognize the blessing which came out of the adversity. What if we could have foresight about what our hindsight will be? If we can expect that we will be able to look back on our challenges with gratitude, then maybe we can let ourselves feel that gratitude a little early. Let me repeat that. If we can expect that we will be able to look back on our challenges with gratitude, then maybe we can let ourselves feel that gratitude a little early. Gratitude always pleases God in the universe, and he will always bless us for our expressions of gratitude. In hindsight, the man said that at times he was so weary that he'd look ahead at a hill or a patch of sand and determine to go just that far, and then give up because he knew he wouldn't be able to pull the load through it. However, when he reached the slope or sand pit, there is where it seemed that the cart began to push him. As retold by David O. McKay, the man said, "I have looked back many times to see who was pushing the cart, but my eyes saw no one." As you can see, the general feeling held by this gentleman was definitely not one of bitterness. He concluded that the price he paid was a privilege to pay because through it he became acquainted with God himself. What an amazing attitude towards adversity. The more submissive we are to God, I believe, the more grateful we can be in our challenges. We can trust that under any circumstance, he has our best interest at heart. We will not always understand his ways, but to trust him as we are led along through life's lessons brings immeasurable peace. We can have gratitude for our present conditions no matter what they are, because it is the lessons of the present that prepare us for the blessings of the future. More about Job. We cannot discuss the lesson without mentioning more about the biblical story of Job. Job truly has to be one of the most unfortunate men that ever lived until his adversity was well behind him. He had everything anyone could ever want. And bit by bit, the Lord allowed it to be taken away. His wealth, his family, his friends, his health. Nevertheless, Take a look at how he handled it in his words. The Lord gave, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall not receive evil? Even when he was overcome with grief from his suffering, he cursed the day he was born, but never cursed God. After this opened Job his mouth and cursed his day. And Job spake and said, Let the day perish wherein I was born. In the end, the Lord prospered Job from 7,000 to 14,000 sheep, 3,000 to 6,000 camels, 500 to 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 500 to 1,000 she-asses. Similarly, we can prosper as we choose to look for the good in any given situation. God appreciates our gratitude and rewards us for it sooner or later. It's not just a great bedtime story. It's in the Bible to teach us how we might live a more blessed life. By living this principle, we're rewarded immediately with greater peace. And if we continue to live by law, we are more likely to enjoy greater prosperity as well. So this is the law of relativity. You want better circumstances? Everybody does. But you must first begin by seeking peace in your present circumstances. You must feel gratitude for all the blessings you already enjoy. I've heard it said, I complained that I had no shoes until I met a man who had no feet. The law of relativity is a tool to help us find gratitude. It gives us a way to think more cheerfully and thus be prepared for greater blessings. Being filled with the Spirit, giving thanks always for all things unto God and the Father in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Do not use the law of relativity against yourself. Let me repeat this. Do not use the law of relativity against yourself. You can do this very easily by comparing your situation to better ones. We are to think of better circumstances as the first step to having them, but we do not think of them to make ourselves feel bad about where we are. We think of them with hope and gratitude that we will eventually enjoy them in reality. Use the law of relativity to aid you in keeping positive thoughts. As you do, the law of perpetual transmutation from chapter 1 will ensure the better circumstances are on their way. Is there ever an opportunity to commiserate without sabotaging our overall objective? Perhaps. I heard one very practical way Dr. Stephen R. Covey, best-selling author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and Families, handled complaining in his family. As the story goes, when they hiked together, they didn't tolerate whining from their children. But at one point, he let them all have a break to rest, whereupon they were encouraged to complain as much as they needed to. Oh, my feet are killing me. How much farther? I'm so tired. Whatever they wanted to say all along, here was their opportunity. And with everyone letting it go at the same time, they eventually became bored with commiserating and were once again able to move on cheerfully. The burden didn't change, but the way they felt about it did. This kind of approach is not the typical response. It had to be intentioned. Just as an ambulance won't automatically come without someone first placing a 911 call. We have to choose to fight the natural tendencies we all have, or give them controlled release, as Dr. Covey demonstrates. But it gets easier with practice, so we must never give up trying. Some circumstances will not change in this life, but how we feel about them can change in a moment. How we deal with them can change for the better. Sometimes it is only after we allow ourselves to feel differently about the problem that we finally receive the blessing we seek. According to the Book of Mormon, there was a group of people who lived about 120 BC on the American continent who experienced this process of change as I've just described. Here's an excerpt from Isaiah's writings. This segment of the story has inspired me and given me faith when I've been in the middle of overwhelming challenges. And it came to pass that so great were their afflictions that they began to cry mightily to God. And Amulon commanded them that they should stop their cries. He put guards over them to watch them, that whosoever be found calling upon God should be put to death. And Alma and his people did not raise their voices to the Lord their God, but did pour out their hearts to him. And he did know the thoughts of their hearts. And it came to pass that the voice of the Lord came unto them in their afflictions, saying, Lift up your heads and be of good comfort. For I know of the covenant which ye have made unto me, and I will covenant with my people and deliver them out of bondage. And I will also ease the burdens which are put upon your shoulders, that even you cannot feel them upon your backs, even while you're in bondage. And this will I do, that ye may stand as witnesses for me hereafter, and that ye may know of a surety that the Lord God do visit my people in their afflictions. And now it came to pass that their burdens, which were laid upon Alma and his brethren, were made light. Yea, the Lord did strengthen them, that they could bear up their burdens with ease. And they did submit cheerfully and with patience to all the will of the Lord. And in the morning, the Lord caused a deep sleep to come upon the Lamanites, yea, and all their taskmasters were in a profound sleep. And Alma and his people departed into the wilderness. And when they had traveled all day, they pitched their tents in a valley. They called the valley Alma, because he led their way in the wilderness. Yea, and in the valley of Alma, they poured out their thanks to God, because he had been merciful unto them, and eased their burdens, and had delivered them out of bondage, for they were in bondage, and none could deliver them except it were the Lord their God. And they gave thanks to God, yea, and all their men, and all their women, and all their children that could speak lifted their voices in the praise of their God. What if the Lord could help us feel our burdens differently? Through knowledge of the law of relativity, he's helped me to do that now and then. And I believe it can help you too. Just try it for a few minutes. Feel some gratitude for something. If you skip this exercise, you run the risk of limiting the extent to which the Lord may bless you. Lesson 3 will teach you how you can use this principle to begin attracting more favorable circumstances to you. The best of all, what is going on behind the scenes, so to speak, to make it happen. Okay, so we will go ahead and stop reading there. And okay, I will come back to you guys right here. Good to see everybody. And this is our opportunity to go ahead and share what we would like to share, or ask whatever questions we would like to ask. Trying to see if there's anybody brand new. I think we might. Okay, so what is appropriate to share, and what are questions that are appropriate to ask? As far as sharing, what we would like you to share is maybe anything that came to you as a result of what we were reading today and going through. If you've been with us for a while, you can share anything in relationship to anything else we've been going through for the last 3+ weeks. The other thing that would be awesome to share is if you've had some success manifesting things in your life intentionally, meaning you wanted something and you felt that you were following the laws that allowed that to happen, and it actually happened for you. Love to hear those stories. What else would be appropriate as far as, let's go talk about questions. Anything in relationship to what we went over today, anything in relationship to what we went over in the past, and or anything.
Hi, Kevin, your mic is out.
Take you in the order that you choose to do that.
Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Good. How are you, Carl?
This has been a tough week for my mom. Yesterday was diagnosed with liver cancer.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's yeah, it is what it is. Something I wanted to bring up yesterday is during our call, but also, that's when I found out about my mom. Was we were talking about the ether world in the passage.
Mm-hmm.
In 2015, I went to an event with Brendan Bouchard, and while I was there, there was a woman talking about a book that she had just read. And I didn't get the author's name or the name of the book, but I got the gist of it, which was the author said that there was an ether world above us, around us. And if we had the ability to tap into that ether world, essentially we could download new ideas, new knowledge, new conversations, and bring forth into our world. And so when we were talking about that passage yesterday, it reminded me of that book. And I was wondering, I don't know if you've ever heard of that premise or if you subscribe to that notion that there is essentially a world above us that we just need to essentially connect to so we can download.
Gotcha. So first of all, everything is created first spiritually before it's created physically. Everything had to be an idea first. Think
Right.
of it in terms of like a blueprint, right?
Yeah.
An architect gets a set of blueprints, but does the architect typically build the house?
No.
No. So who is the creator of the house, though? The architect or the people that build the house?
Both. One cannot exist without the other.
Sort of. Yeah, you're right. Now, could the architect go build the house also if he wanted to, if he had the ability?
Yeah, if he had the training, he could.
Right,
Yes.
right. But essentially, when we say the architect, we can even go back further, and let's say you hired an architect to build a house for you
Mm-hmm.
and to create plans based upon what you wanted. And then eventually you signed off on those plans, right?
Yep.
Well, in the process, once the plans are created, essentially the home is also created. Okay. When you talk about that house, though, and you say when somebody talks about a house that they built from scratch, do they talk about it in terms of, well, what I did is I had an architect build my house and I had the workers build it? No, you say we built our house, right? Isn't that what we
Yep.
had the house built? Why do we refer to it that way? Because it started with us. And if we didn't put the energy into that creation, it wasn't going to happen. Doesn't mean the people all along the way weren't capable, but it wouldn't have happened. So there's a blueprint to everything that's created first before it manifests physically. Now, I think what you're kind of terminating is a little bit of that, but also there can't be, we'll get in those laws pretty quick here. There can't be a question without an answer. There can't be a question without an answer. Any question we have has an answer. Now, we may not know the answer to that question, but that answer exists. So in talking like you are, you can tap into the answer because the answer already exists by spiritually connecting with God in the universe. And then God can speak to your, however you want to see God. God will speak to you. Sometimes it'll feel like it's words, but you will probably predominantly get feelings. You'll get thoughts and feelings that answer your questions. So we can tap into, anytime we have a question, there is always an answer. Do we feel that God is going to reveal that to us? Well, it depends on our beliefs and thoughts and feelings about God and the universe. So if we want to know how to live our life, we will follow those directions. Every single person that's on this call today, not very likely, it's possible, not very likely you're here because you came for entertainment purposes. Okay. And I already have talked to several people that they're like, I wasn't really looking around, but you popped up, right? Well, what you did is you had a question. You have questions that you want answers to. And God and the universe are trying to provide answers to your questions. Now, it doesn't mean you'll get your answers all in one place, right? But you were guided and directed because you were pondering it somewhere at a subconscious level. You put out a vibration, and God and the universe guided you to be here so that you could hear certain things. And you know what? You may not even hear the words that I say. There may be words coming out of my mouth, but what you may hear might be a little bit different even, because you'll have some of your own ideas. I like what Bob Proctor does when he explains going to a seminar. By the way, this is why seminars are really good, but why they're incomplete. I think pretty much everybody on here has attended a seminar either at this point, through technology online and or live in person at some point in their life. You've gone to a seminar workshop kind of thing. And you have this speaker or multiple speakers, teachers at the front, and sometimes you even paid some pretty good money to be there. But think of what actually is going on in that seminar. picture for yourself a sheet of music, like where you have all the bars there, without any notes. Okay. So let's just say there's 5 black lines going across your sheet of paper. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's just say the middle line right there is the seminar happening right in front of you. This is the speaker speaking. Okay. And training, showing slides, whatever they're doing. And what we do when we go to a seminar is we're paying attention, but what happens is at some point an idea gets triggered. And when that idea gets triggered, we actually go up to a new line and then we keep going. So the seminar keeps going and our thoughts are going simultaneously. And then eventually we come back into the seminar. And then another thought happens, I'm hungry. So the speaker keeps on speaking and we go down and we're thinking about what we're going to have for lunch and we're still going along. But then we pop back up and we're back in the seminar again. That's how we live our life because we're always thinking. If we can calm ourselves a little bit, we can pay better attention to what's going on. But the truth of the matter is, God also puts you in situations where you may not get everything that's going on, but you will get the impetus for some cool idea that will help you accomplish what you want to accomplish. And for you, that'll be the coolest seminar you've ever been to. The other thing is you may get a recording of that seminar. Let's say they offer it to you for more money or they give it to you as a gift. And you were just at the seminar this past weekend, and now 2 weeks from now, you go watch the seminar, and like 20% of the seminar feels like you never heard it. Like you're getting new stuff. Well, that's because you didn't hear it. Those were the times where you went off on your idea or you were thinking about lunch or something else. Like right now, as I was just talking about this, some of you paid really close attention and some of you are thinking about other things. That's one of the reasons too, when we're learning how to do things, why a seminar is pretty cool. But what you actually have to do to truly get the meaning of what the teacher was teaching is you have to hear the whole thing in its sequence to get what the person was instructing. To get ideas and go off, you can keep doing that constantly. But if you want to get the full knowledge of the person speaking, you probably have to attend the exact same seminar a dozen times or more. That is one thing that we're not normally inclined to go do. So we never really do when we pay for a seminar or a training, we don't get the full training. We could still be very happy with what we got. We could still move forward. We can get ahas and breakthroughs and whatnot. But we definitely don't get all the information that the person at the front of the room is trying to share with us.
No, I got that.
Yeah. That's why it's funny too. Sometimes we'll do something like this and somebody will ask a question that was actually answered in what we were reading. The reason they're asking that question is that was one of those moments for them where they checked into some idea or, you know, they got distracted by their 5 senses. Anybody have any additional comments or questions?
Hi, Kevin.
Hi.
So yesterday was my second commercial voiceover class. And as
Awesome.
you know, the first one didn't go well. And I was having a good day, but it was just like, it was so weird. It wasn't working out. And so I took your instructions to pray and meditate. And I had that prayer and I had that in my head. I did it the day of and then before class. It was a late class. So I did it twice that day and it went so much better. We had homework. And so we listened to the homework. It was like commercial homework. So it was just MP3s. And those went really well. I mean, especially because it was on my own time. But then we had cold reads and I was a little nervous for that because I hadn't read the material before and, you know, I have to bring life to it for the commercial and it went really, really well. I did feel myself being really physically nervous, but I pushed through it. And overall, I took the direction and I was just more in tune. So I'm really, really grateful for that. And I noticed that this guy, we had takeaways at the end of the class and he said, he loved this other person's note on mentally replacing the product that you're endorsing with something else you personally love to make it authentic. And then he said that he hates selling something and that money is bad. And then I was like, So I put in my head so that there wasn't like a paradigm in my head that is like having that confirmed money is bad. So I said, reject, reject, reject. Cause I was like, no, it's neutral. It's like a hammer, some people use it to harm other people while others use it to like build their house and fix up things. So it's just neutral. So I had that rejected, but I noticed that and I was like, oh no, he has a bad relationship with money.
Well, I'm glad that it went smoother for you. Yeah, you still have that little bit of nervousness, but you programmed yourself to succeed in whatever was going to happen because of what you had done ahead of time. I think a lot of times what we do in life is we're not prepared to walk into certain situations the way we maybe think we should be. I mean, and it's not that being prepared helps. I don't mean prepared in like, okay, I know my ABCs like you do. You know your craft, you're getting better at it, but you know the nuts and bolts of it. What I'm talking about preparing is to say, hey, look, there's a power I can tap into that's greater than my own, that is 100% willing to help me 24/7, 365, if I'll just allow that help to happen. I need to connect myself, and actually we're always connected. I need to bring the signal in more strongly is probably the better way to put it, right? If you're going on a radio station, you might be connected, but I know we got to go back a long ways when you turn the dial to get a radio station. But if it's all totally fuzzy and everything, you might be on the channel, but you can't hear anything. But if you take the time to actually dial it truly in so that you can hear everything clearly, then think of it as you almost have like God or the universe on the other side of your life watching what's happening, and you have this little earbud in your ear and it's dialed in on the frequency through Bluetooth to God in the universe, you're good to go. But if your frequency is different than their frequency, then you're not going to receive the help that you want. So you were able to receive some additional help from the inside because essentially, whether you thought of it this way or not, you treated God in the universe like your life partner and your business partner. That's how I like to see God in the universe in my life, is they're my life partner and they're my business partner. And I want to treat them that way too. Okay. And actually, I want to treat them even better than I think I ought to. But most of us don't. If you really truly care about someone, you want to treat them well. You also want to give them some attention. You also want to say thank you when things happen. And you might want to spend more time with them than you do with Netflix and going on Facebook. If you'll spend that time connecting with God in the universe, your life becomes way more smooth because you'll be guided and directed to take the correct actions to get the results you really want. So I recommend that everybody probably spend more time than they currently are in that connection and in asking and receiving. Because if you ask for their help, they're not going to deny you. It's not like playing a basketball game where you're the guard running up trying to do a layup and there you got a center there called God slapping the ball away every time you're trying to make a shot. What you have is you have a center there to rebound and get you the ball back, or if you miss a shot, it'll bounce off the rim and the center will dunk it in for you. Okay. Think of God in the universe again as your partner, as your life partner, and as a business partner. And if you can really feel that, you will go a long ways in towards manifesting what you want in your life because you will trust them.
I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Any additional comments or questions? Anything anybody want to ask right now that if you don't, you won't sleep well tonight? So you want to get it off your mind?
Kevin, this is Rich. Just one
Rich.
comment.
Yeah.
Hey, just one comment on the reading. When you were talking about, like comparing. It's like sometimes I think one of my cousins was very, very successful. Like his house is about close close to 10,000 square feet. You know, real nice area, et cetera, et cetera. And they're like, geez, I'd like to be like that type of thing. But then, but then I see some of my other friends who are even older than I am, and they're like renting a room from somebody in a house, So, I figured, if I could, let's say, um, uh, let's say if everybody had a ticket with their situation on it, and they could throw it in a hat of the people that I knew, and you could mix up the hat and pull one out. No, thank you very much. I'll I'll keep my own ticket rather than risking uh, being one who's renting a room in a house type of thing. So,
So, so the law of relativity here's essentially what you're supposed to recognize about it. It's good if you want something in life and somebody else has accomplished it, as long as you're not feeling jealousy, as long as it's not making you feel bad, it's good to have that focus, because it just shows you that, hey, if somebody can, then I can.
right.
Right, that's the real. But what people do is they beat themselves up using that. So if you're able to use it for feeling good, use it for feeling good. When it starts to feel bad, then don't use that. Maybe it feels good today but doesn't feel quite as good tomorrow for some reason. Then just use the tool that works now to help you feel good. The way that you can switch that is, like you just said, hey, I at least, I have a nice house and I don't sleep in rent a room in somebody's place, right? So be grateful for that. The whole point is the way that God and the universe operate together. God and the universe, God gives you direction and speaks to you to help you get what it is that you want. The universe, the energy that's out there, it just responds. It doesn't choose good, bad, right, or wrong. That's why people are able to do things in the world and create things that cause more problems than good. God's not the one creating the bad stuff. It's actually us that are creating it through our thoughts and through our programming and whatnot. God is there to help you get what you want, but he's not going to force you, because this is a learning process for all of us that we're going through. But what we can do is, the idea is if you want to be sure that things are going to go well for you, check your feelings. If you're feeling good about something, you're only attracting good at that point in time. If you're feeling bad about something, even if you feel justified in feeling bad, the universe is going to reflect that back to you. I mean, purpose. Even if you feel justified in feeling bad, don't stay there. It's kind of like what Leslie talked about in the book about Stephen R. Covey and his family. He was wise enough to know that, okay, it would have been better not to complain at all. Okay. But they went and did it, and he knew it wasn't going to go on for hours and hours and hours. Let's get it done, get out of the system, and get on with it. But doing that is not helpful, but it's better than staying with it. So they chose to use a tool as a family, because you had different ages and maturity levels and stuff too. When he's out there with, I don't know how many children he has or had. Stephen R. Covey's not with us any longer. I got a chance to meet him, and really cool guy. He understood though that, hey, I want this to be a good experience. There's this complaining thing going on. Let's get this out of our system and then just not allow it for the rest of the trip. You can do that. Let's say that, and don't do it for a whole day or whatever. If you don't have to, keep it as short as possible. But let's compare it to, well, what if you have one day like that out of the month and you got 30 good days? You know what? You're going to be in pretty good shape. Okay.
Yeah. I agree.
Right. right? You're going to ultimately still end up with what you want. You may take yourself backwards a little step, but you'll have made a bunch of steps forward by having had the good days and the good moments and the good times.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, it's all psychological. None of this is about it. Most of the things that are going on in our life, for most of us, not everybody, most of the pain and suffering that we deal with goes on between our two ears. It's not somebody typically pointing a gun at us or beating us with a bat, right? We tell ourselves stories all the time.
Yeah.
And and that's what we do. We're storytellers, we're imaginers. We use our imagination to our detriment. Well, if you can use your imagination to your detriment, then that means on the opposite, relativity, you can use your imagination to your benefit. So you got a choice. We're programmed to use it to our detriment, but we have the ability to use it to our benefit.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what this chapter is about. You know, it's not about feeling all bad for those people. She just wanted to point out, hey, there's people who went through a lot more crap than we do. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we choose to take that? Some of us can go through and read that and get all sad about it. Now it's going to bother us for the rest of the day. So there was a little danger in sharing that, because some people will attach that way. But it was designed to be the opposite. It was designed to look at your own life in a better light. But it's also designed to give us an awareness that it's still just our thoughts and feelings. It's still just the story that we.
It lost the audio for a second. I don't know if you can hear me.
Okie dokie. We are going to call it a day. Thank you all for participating. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.